welcome to GES News. This is the top stories of the week.
About a week ago, a man and the woman he was living with went on a murderous rampage inside a social service center in San Bernardino, California, where the mentioned man worked. The motive is unknown, and about 14 people is confirmed dead, while 17 remain injured. The couple, which probably were husband and wife, were equipped with armor, handguns and rifles. Farouk and Malik, which are the names of the couple, escaped the crime scene in an SUV car. The police chased the vehicle and riddled it with bullets. Both Farouk and Malik died in the pursuit. They were both US born and they met each other online and became acquainted in Saudi Arabia. Authorities are still tracing the origins of the 4 weapons used, 2 handguns and 2 rifles. 30 minutes before the shooting, Farouk was still working and his co-workers noticed he left. This is the deadliest shooting since 2012 when a man killed 27 people in Newtown. President Obama has said that he doesn't know much about the situation, but mentioned that actions like this occur more frequently in the US. So, Staffan, what do you think about this tragedy and Obama's words, which could be interpreted as criticism on US gun laws?
Well, Jonathan, I agree that this is a huge tragedy, as every time something like this occurs. And I say because this occurs very often in the US. However, we should not come to any conclusions with the low amount of information we have received at this incident. We still know nothing about the origins of the weapons and armor they were wearing, according to the information we have been given.
The father of Farouk has told an Italian newspaper that his son Farouk expressed support for the Islamic State and Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, the leader of the Islamic State military. According to the father, he shared the ideology of al-Baghdadi to create an Islamic State, and he was obsessed with Israel. What do you think about this, Emelie? Because apparently the father knew about Farouk's thoughts on the Islamic State and the ISIL.
We have to remember this is the words of a father, and as a father you would never expect your son or daughter to commit an act of terror. But we have to consider that Farouk told his father that he supported the ideology of al-Baghdadi, which is the leader of the Islamic State military. And supporting a leader of terror is hard to look past, even as a father. According to this, the father told the newspaper that the thought of his son. By being so open about it, telling a newspaper, we can tell he wasn't ashamed of the thoughts of his son. But we should not make any drastic conclusions without further investigation. This is a very sensitive subject and should not be concluded hurriedly.
Today, the United Nations Conference on Climate Change, called the COP21, has started. Leaders from all around the world gather in Paris to negotiate a global climate agreement. The negotiations will aim to achieve a legally binding agreement on reducing carbon emissions and increase resources for climate adaptation. The conference is critical because the expected outcome is a new international agreement on climate change, applicable to all, to keep the global warming below 2 degrees. Now over to Emelie in Paris.
2015 is shaping up to be a big year in the climate change debate. Right now, in December, world leaders are due to meet in Paris to finalize an agreement to halt global warming. To which you say, so what? Don't we already have at least one climate treaty, and don't we have these talks all the time? The answer is yes and yes. But Paris is still going to be important. The Industrial Revolution was the beginning of a new era, the era that would change our world, both in a good and in a bad way. The revolution was good for our technological development and our economy, but it was a disaster for our nature. The new technique resulted in an increasing level of carbon emissions, but in the late 1980s, scientists started to warn that this had to stop. Burning coal and the fossil fuels released greenhouse gases such as carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, trapping heat and causing global warming. As scientists started to take their warnings directly to politics, world leaders started to act. 20 years ago, it was decided that the UN would hold annual discussions where leaders from various countries could meet to discuss how they would reduce greenhouse gas emissions. But after 20 years of failure, and without any agreements, politicians are hoping for a better outcome this time. The thing is that we have to act now. Tomorrow it's too late. The oceans warm and the ice keeps melting. Sea levels are expected to keep rising and entire countries could disappear. Wildfires are expected to get bigger. Droughts will get more severe. And 30% of the animals will be put at a risk of extinction. To this meeting, each country are bringing their plans to tackle climate change, and then they will try to cooperate. This time both USA and China are participating, which will lead to better outcomes. During this conference, countries will be fighting about how aggressive these threats are. Who is going to pay for countries to adapt to climate change? And there are a lot of countries out there who haven't done anything to cause it, and they are going to be suffering a lot from the effects of it. How to buy the transitions for renewable energy for countries that can't afford that, and how often these goals are going to be reviewed going forward. I really think that there is still a chance that 2015 will be the year where a global climate change deal covering all countries, rich and poor, small and large, will finally be agreed.
I believe we have a reporter in a refugee camp. Now over to him.
I'm standing here, in the middle of dreams, hope and fear. In the middle of something that is called a camp. But this isn't a camp, this is a swamp. I am Staffan Eriksson, reporting live from a Maltese refugee camp. As I'm standing here, I'm trying to imagine the horrible things that these people have been through. It's impossible to explain and impossible to understand, but I met a man, we can call him Ahmed, who told me about his journey from the war. Ahmed lost 8 members of his family in a tragic disaster at sea. And a 67-year-old man, now recalls the horrible day with a broken heart. The dangerous journey from Syria was going to be conducted by the help of so-called agents, who were supposed to help them to the border of Libya, where, according to the deal, Tunisian smugglers would help them to Malta. But instead, they got into the hands of a gang who kept them locked up on a farm until departure day. The day of departure is when the smugglers have managed to collect the number of refugees they want. Days passed and the gang wanted more and more money. The women who were unable to pay got raped, and the men got tied up and tortured. Finally, Ahmed and his family paid more than 2,500 euros each to get on board the boat that were going to transport them the last leg of the trip. Suddenly, Libyan militiamen showed up and held guns to their heads. They wanted more money, as they had discovered that there were more than 200 refugees on the boat. The fugitives emptied their pockets and were able to put together further several thousands of euros. But unfortunately, this wasn't enough. Ahmed's boat cast off, and so did the boat of the militiamen. They were followed for hours, and the militiamen tried to force them back to Libya. As these efforts failed, the gunmen started to shoot at the defenseless refugees, and severely injured many of them. Soon the bullets punctured the boat, and it sank within minutes. Ahmed survived the disaster, but he can't find a reason for his life anymore. Ahmed, together with most of the survivors, was taken to one of the refugee camps on Malta.
Well, this sounds terrible, but if we look at the whole picture, how is the refugee situation in Europe?
So far this year, 750,000 migrants are estimated to have arrived to Europe by sea. But the exact numbers are unclear due to the fact that many have passed through borders undetected. The most popular country is Germany, which had received more than 330,000 by the end of October. Although statistics show that immigrants aren't evenly divided in the European countries. If we look at asylum applications per 100,000 local population, Hungary is in the top with 1,500. On second place we have Sweden with just under 750, and third in the list is Austria with little more than 500. In my opinion, the EU countries must start working together. We can't solve this situation if you just look at our own interests. We need to look at the whole picture. If we take Sweden as an example, they are taking a big responsibility in helping refugees. Unfortunately, it seems like they have reached their limit, as they now temporarily have closed their borders. Just looking at Sweden, it may seem egoistic to close the borders, but I think this is the only solution right now. They need to be able to help the ones that already arrived, in a good way. According to me, the only solution is that the EU make greater demands on countries that don't take so many refugees. The EU has to put one's foot down. Hopefully, this is only a short-term solution. The goal is that immigrants will be able to return to their own countries in the future.
And this was the GES news of this week.